All right, we're live. We are live, ready to rock and roll here on December 4th, 2025, talking about why product managers must learn to sell. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, Mr. Chris.
Hey, David. Great to see you again today. December,
Yeah.
that's crazy, by the
Yes.
way.
And you see you're nice and warm with your pullover, just like I am. Us two North Carolina boys are freezing our butts off in this cold weather.
It's gotten cold the last couple weeks, so.
Well, we're going to talk about a topic that's very near and dear to me, and that's the selling skills of product managers. So let's tee it up a little bit. We'll talk about disruptive product launches, product managers' role in disruptive product launches, and give me some of your thoughts about why. So why do you think this is a necessary skill? You know why I think, and I'll talk more about it. But you start the setup.
So why? Well, the biggest problem is for disruptive product. There's this role in the early sales that no one's filling in a lot of cases.
All right, that's number one. You've been doing this for so long. Basically, it's become nobody wants it, but somebody needs to do it, but nobody's doing it.
Well, I think part of it's nobody wants it, but I think the other part is it's kind of unrecognized, Dave. It's undistinguished. People think that the sales team knows how to sell a disruptive product right out of the gate.
So that's what's happened. The default wise, everybody says the sales team are the ones that should be doing this.
I think that's kind of the default. And I think that the VP of sales, they take it on and they hand it to their sales reps. But there's this gap that lives between late product discovery and getting to market scale. That's just a hole in all organizations.
So as we try to reach out to the sales side of things with Agile Market Entry, it became one of those things that it was still kind of alien to them. They didn't quite grasp it. We talked about this idea of bimodal sales model potentially, where you had your repeatable sale process on one side, and then you had your disruptive discovery process on the other side. But the mechanics of how a VP of sales operates, it just didn't seem to fit into their brain right now for some reason.
No, because they kind of own sales, so they don't get that it's missing, or in their world it's not missing. But the way it shows up in their world, that's missed. The way it shows up then is people launch products and they end up struggling, and then they end up pointing fingers.
It's even funny too. Yeah, it's Chris. It's not even just disruptive products. In some cases, if it's quasi-disruptive products, they start pointing fingers and they start blaming this and blaming that. And the marketing will always blame the sales team. Product management might blame the sales team and some of the marketing team. And really, what it comes down to is we are looking at this thing going, look at when we see it work, the product managers are usually more deeply involved in the sales discovery process.
Yeah, and I think some product managers naturally kind of gravitate to this, but a lot of them don't. The product managers that get out into the market and do the customer discovery and start engaging with customers during the pilots, the ones actually get out into the field and actually engage with customers. I think they naturally can kind of fall into this role.
Yeah, but they have to switch it up a notch. So as we talked about earlier on, I did a lot of sales engineering work when I was with a company as a product manager. So this was not disruptive product. This was existing product, helping them customize, position, sell the whole bit. In my mind, I was selling, but that ain't selling.
That is
selling is different. Being a sales engineer is not the same as selling.
Correct. Right.
Product managers, we got to remember that but I thought I was selling. I thought, I'm out there selling, right?
Right.
So product managers have to realize that part of the sales process that's the hardest is engaging initially, finding the right person to engage with, setting up the time to talk to that person, getting the conversation going, and creating the work necessary to do that.
Yes.
Where, that's not necessarily product managers come in when that's all done and then help them try to close the sale.
Correct. And they end up being the technical expert or the,
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, that is probably, I don't know, that's probably a third or 50% of sales is just getting to the right people with the right.
That's it, right?
To get started. And that's the front end of the pipeline. Then there's a whole sales process. Then there's the customer, satisfaction side of things and the customer delivery. But yes, there's all those things. Who do we call on?
Mm-hmm.
What's the message we use to
what messages are we going to use? What messages are they going to resonate? What do you do when it resonates?
Yep, exactly. And then how do we feed that back into, marketing is guessing at this too. So someone's got to figure out, someone's got to feed the messaging back to marketing so they can build the marketing messaging so it works for those early customers as well. All
this is why it works, because the founder, your product, Agile Market Entry, resonates so well with founders and entrepreneurs, because really that's the starting point. Usually, I start a new product, the entrepreneur basically is the product manager and the sales team, covers all those hats, does all the discovery work. But what we find things breaking down is when we try to help larger companies begin to test out disruptive products, and it all falls apart because there's nobody wearing that hat.
Well, first of all, a couple things in there. One is there's no one in a larger company that's acting like the founder and the CEO that's doing that missionary type of work. There's no role like that in a big company. That's number one. But if you look at the small companies, the startups, if that person hasn't ever sold before, they don't have any sales skills, which are necessary to do this as well. So you've got the large companies where there's no role like that. No one's owned it, and no one's even distinguished. No one's even distinguished that's missing. And then in the startup companies, you have a founder trying to do this, but they have to go through all the learnings of what it is the skill set of selling, which is a whole nother issue. But that's a whole nother conversation. Right?
So we get into this now. You should see somebody's in our session trying to hack in with some comments, and they're not realizing it's not going to work. Anyways, we can delete those out as well. So if I'm sitting here as a product manager, and I am trying to build these sales skills out, the first thing I got to realize is I have to begin testing out what I thought my ICP was. So, and this is the thing, like I can theorize what ICP is, but I haven't tested it. So how do I test the ICP?
And until you're actually selling, like closing customers, and in that conversation, you can't actually finally validate your ICP. That's where. Right. And again, you can do customer discovery. You can hypothesize. You can try to get, you can try to qualify who your ICP is. But I'm doing this with a client right now, Diagnostic Biochips, and they came to me a year and a half ago about where they thought their early customer was, and they had a little experience of getting some business there. And in the first 3 months or 2 months, we decided their hypothesis was wrong, and we had to completely shift and discover where there was a customer in the market that had the problem and was willing to pay to solve that problem.
And that's where the PM is so good at it, because a salesperson isn't necessarily going to know how to make that pivot, right? My salesperson knows, okay, where's my research? How do I find those ICPs? Testing out the messaging for the ICP to respond with an expectation that the mathematical formulas will work, the repeatable sales process work, and every 15 contacts, I'll get someone to engage with. So I come in as a PM in the disruptive product. I have my initial ICP. I begin messaging to that ICP. And just like you said, oops, this isn't working.
Correct.
Now I have the skills to then analyze what did I miss? What's the new adjustment to the ICP? Or what's the new adjustment to the messaging to positively impact that ICP?
Right. Do I have to shift my target market, or do I have to shift my messaging to that market to talk to the real problems that they're having? And that all has to go on in real time as you're selling. and the other thing from a sales standpoint, they're not trained to do this. That's not their job.
No.
They're not trained to discover who the ICP is and discovering what the message is and discovering how to sell. They're trained to here's your customer, here's how you message to them, here's the objections, here's how to overcome the objections. Okay, now go and sell. The other problem you have with the sales team is they're going to get disinterested. In a big company, they've got a bag of products. And if they find that the ICP and the target customer, the messaging isn't working, they're going to go back to what they know. So you're going to lose them. So you're going to literally lose them right out of the game.
That's right. They're going to say, this doesn't work. This is stupid.
Doesn't work. I'm going to go back to what I said. Hey, I've got a quota. I've got to hit my quota for the quarter. I love the idea of this new product, but man, I don't have time to figure this out. I know how to do this already. I'm going to do it. So literally, this is where the product manager has to come in. They have to go to sales with the product and with the sales process in order for the sales team to be successful.
Yes.
And that's the role that's not in big companies and people aren't filling it. And the ideal
unless a product manager decides to take this on their own. So here's the other selling skill too, Chris, that they don't have, which is they don't have the active drive to close. Like as a product manager, if I'm even doing sales engineering, I'm not actively closing. I'm just coming in there to make us look smart, to make myself feel good. And then I walk away and the salespeople are happy, the customer's happy, but they still have to close it.
Yes.
Because the sales process is nothing without knowing how to close it too. So they're going to have to take that discovery sale all the way through to figure out what it is that you ultimately sell and close the customer on.
Correct. Right. So this is where it's almost two-headed. You have to have the product mindset, but you also have the salesperson's mindset. So and I got to tell you, most sales reps are not going to come back and do the product piece. They're just not going to.
No, they're not. It's not going to happen.
And the VP of sales isn't going to do it either.
Because their compensation models tied to effectiveness in selling. It's not tied to.
Yep.
So they're not tied to a, what do you call it? They're not tied to
a quota.
So that it's like, so if I'm a salesperson, I'm tied to a quota. I have to go out there and close. I don't have the time to jerk around.
Yes. And right. They don't have time. So they don't have time to do the discovery work. Anything that's going to slow them down on closing, they're not going to do. But this is where the project manager's mindset have to shift in a little bit. They're not going into support sales when they're filling this role. They're actually going on. They're being the first sales rep. They are performing the function, and they're in a good position because they understand the product. They understand they've probably done the customer discovery, so they probably have the best understanding from what.
And they're open to a longer process. See, that's what I was trying to get at with the salesperson is that a really good salesperson, unless there's true gravy in a longer sales process, isn't going to be bothered with that. Isn't going to be bothered with the tweak or the adjustment. They're just going to say, get me to the one that I can sell fast and effectively. Get me to the one that there's actually generating interest in.
And they've got product A, B, and C that they're already selling where a sales cycle might be 3 months or 6 months or whatever, and they know how to manage it.
Even if the sales cycle's long too, they can see the buying cycle. They can see the buying trends.
And they know it, and they know how to move people through it. Now you get them a product that's disruptive and new, and you put it in. One thing is they don't know the steps. They think they're making the steps, and all of a sudden they get to 3 months and they're not closing anything, and they're saying, I'm out of here.
So what I got here, Chris, is when we talked about it. So in the early stages, you got to validate who the real buyer is.
Yep.
And they're ready to buy.
Yep.
If they can, you got to close. We talked about the closing skills. Close the early adopters, right?
And the early adopters, that's really critical because that's something that's different with disruptive products. You're not, a sales rep, anybody is a potential customer if they've got money and they've got a problem, right?
And here's the big thing you put on here, which I thought was really good. So when I read this and I came back to you and said, this is really good, Chris, is that you said, this is not marketing research. This is commercial combat. That's the thing that product managers have to realize. Just because you had a conversation and there was engagement, that's market research. That's not what we're talking about here, which is you have to take it to some level of close and not just give it away for free. Like in some cases, you have a pure salesperson, you have a biz dev person, you have a product person. A biz dev person might be apt to give some things away for free to stimulate things.
Yep.
And they might consider that a sale. Same with a product manager. It's not a sale.
That's not a sale.
Giving something away for free or shaking hands that you're going to have some quasi partnership is not a sale.
No, that's not sale. No.
The sale is a customer giving you a PO and using what it is you're talking to them about.
And that's a hard transition for big companies and small companies to make from that. But that's the mindset that the product manager has to shift from. They're shifting from, I'm in a project management role where I'm doing customer discovery, where I'm learning, to actually I'm in hand-to-hand combat with the market, and I'm trying to close business. And in that process of closing business, I'll learn how to sell to this customer.
And that's how I'm going to make money. Like I'm going to get my bonus because I'm going to figure out the most repeatable way to sell this widget in whatever framework it needs to be sold in to whoever's going to want it the most.
Well, that's the real issue in all this, because this idea of a repeatable sales process or getting the repeatability. Until you get the repeatability in the sales process, you don't have a profitable product. So that's the goal of that is fundamentally the goal of the product manager when he's doing it, is to get to that repeatable sales process that he can then hand over to the sales team to execute at scale. So that's the repeatability. That's what
the final package should be that package. The entrepreneur already does this. The entrepreneur is doing it themselves. They're out there going into the marketplace, test casing ICPs, adjusting the product accordingly based on how the ICPs are responding. And then once they got some stable of pipeline, watch and see what closes, and then say, okay, this is where you find these people. This is the messaging that best resonates with these people. This is the way the product works for these people. Now, let's see if I can bring a sales engine and marketing engine together to generate the marketing qualified leads that convert to the sales qualified leads that get the sales team running.
And then give that to the sales team and see if they can execute the way the way we've laid out the plan. Now you have something that's proven.
So we know an entrepreneur does that. And you do a phenomenal job coaching entrepreneurs, and you have for years, about this very thing, right? And you're doing it every day, day in and day out. Me, with my bigger company experience, although not huge, but bigger company experience, is coming to both of us and saying, this is where companies fall apart. They usually have to buy this capability. They usually just go out and buy something that's disruptive and make it run for a while, then try to figure out a way to bring it in. And when they bring it in, they kill it.
Or they buy it when it's already, they wait until it's at scale, and now it's already.
Yeah, it's exactly what they do. They wait. They
coming to them with all the sales process.
Because that is a way you can do that. It's called the spin in, spin out. You can spin out the spin back in, and there's been some bigger companies that have successfully dealt with disruption that way. But there's also risk in that model too.
But I think that the most cases, or the more common cases, the one you described, where they get a technology, it's got some early traction in the marketplace, maybe they buy it because it's this cool technology, they hand it over, and then they end up killing it. I've seen that happen. There was a company I was working with 5 or 6 years ago that was in the ophthalmic space, and they were doing about $20-30 million a year. They sold it to J&J, and they're now doing like 5 or 10.
Oh man, so many of those stories. I think that story is going to be told about IBM and the Red Hat IBM story, as Red Hat now completely starts to integrate that monster into the mothership, and it's sad because that company, had a really good disruptive product mindset and attack into the marketplace, and not only did Unix and graphical interface Unix, but then they got into DevOps, and they got into other middleware solutions as well, and they really did a nice mark for themselves in pivoting and adjusting over a period of time.
But also, yes, I agree with that, and it's hard to see these scenarios go down when they crash and burn once every. But
so a product manager here, Chris, doesn't even understand the manager pipeline. Like you talk about this, validate and invalidate critical assumptions. That's how you manage a pipeline. Document early wins and losses. That's how you manage a pipeline. So really, one of the skills they have to do is they have to attack their discovery process like a salesperson, using a pipeline methodology to be able to show documentation as to, okay, what's worked and what hasn't worked. And that's not necessarily a skill set that a product manager brings to the table.
Yeah, so yeah, they're going to have to change their behaviors. They're going to have to learn some new things to do this, but they're well positioned to do it because they understand they're probably the best fit to do it because they understand the product and the customer at that moment in time better than anybody else in the company. Right?
Yeah. So what we're saying here then is that in order for a product manager in a larger company to do this, they have to build the discovery sales process mindset and then learn how to do discovery selling.
Right.
Let's talk about discovery
let's
selling.
talk about for a second, real quick about that. So, and this is one of the things I noticed when I started developing my agile market entry sales model is that all the things that people were doing, design, design thinking, customer discovery, the lean startup, it was doing a lot of the right things, particularly like the customer discovery piece that product managers are doing all the time. Voice of customer around the product design.
Yeah, but it's not selling. It's not selling.
So the piece that was missing is a sales framework that is
it's not selling. I could do lean startup all day. I can iterate and test and see some engagement levels, but it's not actual selling. Most likely,
not the actual selling, and that's
I'm iterating on some metric like how many eyeballs looked at it, or how many people filled out a form fill, or how many folks utilized X part of the product, and then I iterated over that. It's not necessarily going to be, well, how many people did I get in the pipeline? How many people did I close in the pipeline? And then what was the average sale that I got? Right. Or how did the product change in order for me to sell it?
Yep. Yes, exactly. And that's what I do with all my startup companies all the time. And oftentimes I don't work with experienced salespeople. I work with a marketing person or an engineer that's, I end up working with a lot of engineers and just teach them step by step, how do you go through the repeatable sales process. And then I work them through step by step on how to do that. So it's not.
Well, that makes sense because the engineer is an entrepreneur and got the entrepreneur mindset, so they're more open to wanting to get closer and closer and engaging the customer at that level. Sales can be very awkward. It makes some people very uncomfortable.
It can be, but the way we do it, it's very comfortable for the engineers and the engineer mindset to do this, or the product management mindset to do this. And what ends up happening, it's kind of fun, and it's they end up closing and starting to sell, and they don't even realize they're really doing it. It's just as we step through the process, as we get to that point, they end up starting to close and they start closing business, and it's a natural flow from the discovery process that we do early on into the sales process. If they know the right things to do and the right things to do and the things not to do, right?
Yeah. You got to practice. How do you get a customer to set up a meeting with you? What are the language techniques? What are the timing techniques? Which tools do they going to want to set up the meeting with you with? Are they communicating over email, over chat, over cell phone? Yep. These are all the sales technique stuff that you do have to get a handle on.
And then some of the nuanced stuff, like what is a signal? When are we getting a signal from the market, and when is it still just noise? And how do we start separating that?
Yeah, and that's the thing that goes back to nice. So as a product manager who does discovery selling and discovery business development, I have to filter everything through nice to know versus need to know, and I have to filter everything through would they sign a PO for it. So the problem with product managers is they start to fall in love with what they do. Okay. Sure, this is the biggest problem that holds them back. You fall in love with it. So then if you're doing the discovery sales process, you're going to try to do everything in your power to make this thing that you fell in love with work.
Right.
And what you have to do as a product manager, you have to fall in love with that product providing a valued outcome, whether it's internal use or external selling of making money.
So the mind shift, Dave, is instead of falling in love with what you do in your product, fall in love with solving problems for the customer
that they actually pay for.
That they actually pay for. Exactly.
The creation of that. If you fall in love with the creation of value, engaging someone. So, and this is a tough one because you build something as a product manager based on, your experience, what you've read, who you've communicated with. And the problem now is that with a high rate of speed, if you're not doing a good job of diversity and diverse thought, you're going to end up with a confirmation bias situation.
Yep.
That if it worked, it only worked because you were lucky, not because you were any good.
Yep.
It's almost to the point where you have to.
There's a mindset around that where you go in is you build experiments, right, to test those questions that you have. Is this the right problem, or is this a problem in the customer's mind, or what is it? Is this the problem that's going to get them to actually purchase a product? What are they going to pay for that product?
Who else would they buy from if not us on this situation?
Whether
who did they buy like products from? Those type of things. Because even as a product manager, why I think you have to wear your biz dev hat, you might find a product that would sell, but you might not have, your organization might not have the capability. You may have to partner for those sales.
Yeah, sure. Oh, right.
And that's found out with me right now, Chris, as you know. What was I complaining about? I have a product that everybody wants, but I can't sell it. Everybody else can sell it. So I had to make sure in our discovery process that I can't throw it out just because I can't sell it.
Right.
And I don't know. I'm still trying to discover why it is I can't.
Yes.
So I'm still doing discovery selling, why we're making money, because for some reason they can sell it. I can't.
Right.
But so I gotta keep doing that until I build a repeatable process, which I haven't done so yet.
Got it. So you're still creating experiments. You've had failed.
Our poor sales team just does more with partners right now than they do direct selling because they don't know who to call. They don't know. I can't give them a list and say, call these folks. And of the 100 you call, 2 will have some activity and 1 will belong your pipeline.
This is it. But David, this is exactly what happens when you're doing something disruptive and new. It's going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, 3 steps forward, 2 steps backwards.
That's why I think and this is why a PM needs to have a good business model mindset as well. As a salesperson isn't going to think in terms of business model. Because when you're actively doing discovery selling, you might find out that there's a pivot in the business model. Like, for instance, you might be selling a hardware device and you need to sell the data that the hardware device produces.
There's over a 50-50 guarantee that you're going to have to change something significant in your business model.
That's why it's not just the product that you're going to have to change. It might be the business model. And this is where we got to make sure product managers, because product managers should be the most well-versed outside of an entrepreneur. Right. Outside of a small business owner, within big companies, the product manager should be the most well-versed in what the business model is, the different types of business models, and what go-to-market business model could potentially work in their given marketplace. Usually it's the hammer and the nail, right?
Yep.
My business model, I'll pound into every piece.
Right. But that's the discovery mindset, Dave. That's where you got to step back, and you always got to be in this. That's the other shift. For a sales rep, they're in execution mode. Head, forward. When you're launching a disruptive technology, you got to be in the discovery mode. You got to be curious. You've got to be, willing to try. You've got to be very willing to fail. And when you fail, you've got to learn from those failures, right? You got to take as much data, and take each one of those failures to learn from. We're on the with this client of mine, we're actually starting to sell. We just launched the product at a major meeting out in San Diego, and we have 5 demos to do. And we went to do the first one this week, and we closed the deal. We sold, but in the process of selling, we got the first initial sale, but to get a long-term sale, the next question, okay, that answered this question, that solved this problem. Now, what do we do with the technology has been the next question. Which means that's a whole nother, this is a very disruptive technology in a very emerging market. That's a whole nother can of worms we have to figure out as a company. So it's like, okay, we pressed forward, but now we've bumped up against the next thing we have to start learning into the sales
in
process.
That scenario, you're working closely. In that scenario, you're working closely with the founders, right?
Oh, we're working with founders, working with the whole team. We're in the customers. We're finding we're going to have to do a lot more teaching and training post sale than we thought we were going to have to do.
That's an interesting one that you found as part of the process. So now do you do managed services as the add-on? That maybe you've never done managed service sales before, but that might be the the win case.
And we're starting to talk about, okay, how do we in the short term, how do we make sure we don't have this take over a whole technical team and overwhelm them? Because doing it for 4 customers is very different than doing it for 40, right? And then the other question is how and when can we monetize it? Maybe that's where we'll make more money from that than maybe that might be as big or bigger revenue generator than the hard product sales. We don't know.
So let's kind of finish up here as we're at the 30-minute mark. You have some good notes. I'm going to read them here. Advice to PMs and leaders. PMs, block time in the field every week. Can you shadow sales calls?
Yep.
Interview customers, even non-buyers.
Well, the non-buyers are the best ones. Why didn't they buy? Why didn't you buy? You got to be learning from your failures as well.
Observe installs, training, and early use by customers, just like you talked about.
Man, so the close is just the beginning of the sales process when you're launching a disruptive technology.
And now on the guidance for sales leaders, with the PMs being involved, make sure that you expect that there's going to be co-selling. The salesperson's got to be excited that there's discovery selling going on even within their client. It might be a new division within the client or a new department. Yeah, you got to give them access to the customers. You can't say, no, you can't talk to our customers.
That's the other thing that you got to be really careful. I mean, big companies, the thing that I saw this early in my career, they have this huge untapped value in existing customers that they don't leverage across their whole company.
Oh yeah, man, that's the thing. It's like the 80-20 rule. 80. There's so much potential in that. So, anyways, Chris, fantastic job. Love it. Great conversation. Lots of training that could be had in building product managers up to get some selling skills, specifically in discovery selling. Thank you for your time, brother.
What I want to leave people with, Dave, is don't look at this as a problem. Look at this as a huge opportunity, because disruptive products are the ones that are going to disrupt it. Well, with AI going on and everything is changing, there's so much disrupting going on. If you can position yourself as an expert on launching disruptive technologies and figuring out the repeatable sales process, you create huge value for your company as well as for yourself inside your company.
All right. Great share. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, David.